Ariva, first, how surprised were you by the outcome this week?
Not very surprised, Michael, particularly when you look at what this former DA testified to during that hearing. He's all over the place. I just couldn't believe the recklessness in which this whole matter was handled. He says he issued a press release to be the binding agreement by which Cosby would not be prosecuted and would relinquish his most important right, constitutional right against self-incrimination. And he signed a press release. But yet his statements during the hearing were so inconsistent about what his actual words in that press release meant. I think a DA's promise not to prosecute should mean something, should be withheld by the court. But I can see why this judge was troubled by this agreement because it was so recklessly executed. So I wasn't terribly surprised by his ruling, although I think it's not the right ruling. I think it's incorrect.
Bill Brennan, I think one of the more interesting facets and unreported facets of the DA's testimony is what he had to say about attacks that might be forthcoming to the alleged victim's credibility. I'm going to run through some things on screen that I've pulled out of that testimony. Remember, this is the old DA. He said, I believed Ms. Constad's account of what occurred. Well, what I think and what is provable in a courtroom, they're different things. So he believed her, but he thought he'd have difficulty proving it. Then this. What I think is Andrea Constad was inappropriately touched by Mr. Cosby. And he said this. She had ruined her own credibility and would not be believed by a jury. Inconsistencies, the contact of a civil lawyer before a criminal lawyer, the delay in reporting, the inability to gain forensic evidence. I did not think she could withstand cross-examination to the point where reasonable doubt would be overcome. And how about this, Bill Brennan? For example, within days, she had changed the date of when it happened from March of 04 back to January of 04. And finally, the DA testified. That is why I asked the court to consider this privately, because I can go through that very extensively and demonstrate to all assembled here how Ms. Constad would be easily discredited in a courtroom. Well, if the old DA thinks she'd be easily discredited, that doesn't speak well for the likelihood of Bill Cosby being convicted. React.
Michael, I agree. It's some of the most unusual and inconsistent testimony that I've ever seen. We have the former district attorney who says that he personally thinks that Mr. Cosby may have acted inappropriately, but then basically gives a primer for the defense on how to attack Ms. Constad's credibility. The lack of a prompt complaint, the inability to gain any forensic evidence, the fact that apparently she can't decide if it happened in March or in January, going to a civil lawyer. I mean, it's a roadmap for how to attack the complaining witness in this case. And then when the request is made to go into a private setting in camera or in chambers where the transcript indicates, paraphrasing, hey, let's go in the back, guys, and I'll tell you how really bad it is. I mean, it just seems to prognosticate that the prosecution is going to be an uphill battle in this case for a conviction.
Ariva, if in fact the alleged victim, a year after, because that's when she makes the report, couldn't remember whether it was March or January, that would seem significant, no?
Absolutely, that would be significant, but I think we shouldn't rush to judgment. We know that Bruce Cantor and this victim have issues, and her lawyer has said she wouldn't even participate or support a prosecution if he was the DA prosecuting the case. So we haven't heard from her. We don't know what her testimony is. So I don't think we should assume that she's not credible. And I have real problems with Cantor because he's all over the place with respect to his own testimony. So I don't think he's such a credible witness that we can rely on what he has said to completely condemn the case that Ms. Constad has, or potentially this new DA has, against Mr. Cosby.
Bill Brennan, I should point out that Bruce Castor never met the alleged victim. He was relying on the reports that she had given to law enforcement. Respond to what you heard from Ariva.
Well, Michael, that's not unusual that the district attorney would not meet the complaining witness. That's why he has detectives on his staff, a first assistant district attorneys. But he testified under oath that he read all the reports. And the facts remain that this allegedly traumatic event in this individual's life, where if it did occur, is traumatic, and I'm not demeaning it in any way, but you would think that the person could remember, was it March or was it January? And you would think that maybe you wouldn't wait a year and conduct an investigation into whether or not you could prevail civilly and get a payday on this before you go to the police. I think these issues, unpleasant, they're unpleasant, but they're out there, and the defense is going to go crazy on them in court.
Ariva, you get the final word.
I agree that the testimony given by the former DA looks very damaging and damning to Ms. Constant, but we have not heard her testify, and I think until we do that, we must reserve judgment on whether she will or will not be a credible witness in this case.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair, and I simply wanted to illuminate the fact that the old DA made a lot of statements about her credibility, and I should point out he's being sued for defamation by her right now as we sit here.